Good evening. Good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Lens, sponsored by Jott-Nyx Paranormal. I am Jamie Widener. I'll be your host this evening. And as you probably noticed, we have some guests. So before we get to that, though, here's Chad Thomas as well.
Yeah.
Hey, Chad, what's going on, sir?
Well, apparently
Literally, what is going on?
some technical difficulties this evening. I knew it was going to happen as soon as the promo started rolling, and I'm like, I can't fix it now. So
we're just going to go, right?
Yeah,
That's what we do.
And we kept rolling back and forth. So
welcome to this very live podcast.
So Jamie, how are you this week?
Oh, dude, I am busy, and today, I don't know how today happened. It just did, but yesterday was Labor Day, so a holiday for all, hopefully anyway. And today was the day of getting 2 days into one. The bonus of catching up. So this a whirlwind of stuff happening, and then coming home, stuff to do. Obviously get to hear. And one thing that never fails me is it always happens. I walk my dog every night, and the night that we have a show, she takes the longest walk possible and the longest time of her walk possible. So that was tonight as well. So just the hustle to get here, and then like, come on. She doesn't listen. She doesn't speak English, apparently. Who knew?
Maybe maybe she's from Germany and she speaks German. You got to learn German.
Maybe. That's a challenge. All right.
So
I'm going to go through like all the languages, and she's sort of looking at me like, what?
So, yeah. And I had the same thing, it was the beginning of the month as well. So it's inventory time at work. So trying to catch up on all that and get everything done and ready to go. So it was a busy day. So
yeah. Well, here we are though, right?
Here we are.
Tuesday night, and it's go time. So I don't want to waste any time here. Let's just get to it. I think we have some fantastic guests tonight, something that's been a long time coming, and something I've been incredibly excited to have happen. And so no pressure, right?
Exactly.
Let me introduce our guest. So joining us on the podcast tonight is Jeffrey A. Tolbert, PhD, Associate Professor of American Studies and Folklore at Penn State, Harrisburg. His work focuses on supernatural belief and practice, popular media and digital culture, and the folkloresque, which is a very hard word for me to say. I keep wanting to say something like blah, blah, blah. He is the co-editor with Michael Dillon Foster of the Folkloresque, Reframing Folklore in a Popular Cultural World from 2016, and Mobius Media, Popular Culture, Folklore, and the Folkloresque from 2024, both from Utah State University Press. Also with us is Sean E. Dixon, a PhD candidate in American Studies at Penn State Harrisburg. Sean's research explores the supernatural, vernacular religious expression, and the ways socio-political identity shapes the construction of belief. And man, that sounds fascinating. I'm really looking forward to discussing that. Together, their current project examines supernatural belief in the contemporary United States, beliefs that are often dismissed or stigmatized. My goodness. They focus, I'm going to just stop and just read. They focus particularly on paranormal investigators, people who grapple with questions of truth, evidence, experience, and science as they work to develop their own understandings of the beings and forces that may exist within and beyond our world.
That was a mouthful, but let's bring
it a lot. That is so cool. So without any other ado, gentlemen, welcome to the Paranormal Lens podcast.
Hey, everybody. Thank you very much for that nice introduction. Wow.
Pleasure to be here.
That's great. We never get ovations like that at academic conferences as well.
I just realized my dog probably doesn't understand me because I can't speak English very well. Maybe that's really what it is. Like, gosh. Whew.
I think they're very selective in their understanding. They understand exactly as much as they want to understand.
They want to. It's like teenagers.
I was thinking the same thing. Yep.
Oh, all right. My goodness. So where do we start? Like, there's so much fascinating things that you're both up to. And I obviously, we've alluded over the last several episodes leading to this of your research project that you've been at least partnering with us a little bit, in cooperation with us at least a little bit as our team at Jott-Nyx Paranormal and our work at Booby's Brewery in Mountjoy, PA. Shameless plug there, right? Gotta have it. But with it, there's obviously more, and your work's not done. We understand that, but what can you tell us? And I probably have a couple questions along the way. I'm sure Chad does too. So, where do you want to begin?
Well, maybe in a nutshell, let me start over. I guess at the beginning we should talk a little bit about how we as folklore scholars approach what we call the supernatural belief. I know that maybe supernatural is not a term that everybody in the paranormal investigation world is a fan of for various reasons. One of the reasons that we use the term supernatural rather than the paranormal is because the term paranormal is, at least in part, related to attempts to approach certain kinds of events and phenomena from a scientific perspective. And so, because of that, it doesn't entirely encompass all of the kinds of beliefs and phenomena that we're interested in learning about. There are supernatural phenomena in other cultural contexts and other time periods and experiences associated with them that people don't necessarily attempt to approach through the rubric of Western scientific empiricism. So we kind of shy away from using the term paranormal unless we're talking specifically about what paranormal investigators do. In which case, it makes tons of sense to use that language and talk about how people are engaging with technologies and science and issues of proof and evidence. But maybe Chad, do you think we could put some of the slides up that we have? This might help us to get started. So this is just our little title slide: ethnography and the supernatural. Ethnography, of course, it refers to in the most basic sense to the study of culture. Literally, it means writing about culture, and it's a research method employed by anthropologists, folklorists, sociologists, other disciplines as well. And it primarily involves participant observation, which means that we actually get involved in different aspects of culture directly with the people who are our teachers, who we're learning from. So in the case of Sean and my research, that's you guys. We do participant observation by going to public events at Boobies with you and learning about the things that you do from you and sort of becoming insiders, and at least as much as such a thing as possible, in the context of that culture that we're interested in learning about. Sean, anything you want to add to that?
Yes, some past anthropologists have referred to this as sort of deep hanging out, where we spend time with you, we learn from you, we engage with you guys on a social level, and then interpret it later. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I like that phrase a lot.
Yeah, and I always enjoy when you guys are at the investigations with us, because you're asking questions in such a polite way. It's almost like you're just another guest there. You're not like, I don't know how to explain it. It's not like, what are you doing or why are you doing that? It's like, it's just a conversation, and it's really cool the way you handle yourselves and that.
Oh, thank you, Chad.
Yeah.
Well, you guys are very, very kind. You and the whole Jott-Nyx team have really been extremely patient with us, bumbling around your public investigations, and getting in your face with those questions. So I'm really glad to hear that you think that. I was worried we were being obnoxious.
Well,
thank you for having us.
Of course, there's two kinds of things I think with people. There's those who don't understand what we do, and then there's those who kind of do and do. I mean, there's a separation somewhere in there, and the questions are toned differently in that. You can usually tell those who are skeptical or disbelief, or we're just up to a bunch of hooky, weird stuff that we do, and you do what, and then there's the you do what, it's in the tone.
Oh, and, yeah, I see what you mean.
So you are in the secondary of that. You're in the positive tone where you do, and it's our job, and this is what we do for the guests that attend those events. We are as much teachers as we are active, involved, engaged in the process of the investigation. We're showing folks how to investigate along the way. So we're used to the questions. We're used to the skeptic as well. Don't get me wrong, because there certainly are plenty of those who come. And it's usually the other of the couple who didn't know they were coming that night. Right? It happens. But it is that moment where you have their intention at least. And I can't say we will ever sway someone who is a non-believer or a disbeliever, either way, into belief. But I'd like to think we present enough opportunity for them to follow different directions, choose should they choose to at some point, whether that day or elsewhere, whatever their takes them, they'll get there.
Yeah, well, that's really precisely the reason that we're interested in working with paranormal investigators like yourselves. Learning more about that process is, I think, is one of the kind of core focuses of the study that we're working on.
Yeah, and sorry, Jeff, didn't mean to talk over you there.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we're not really concerned about whether or not the things that people believe are true in the sense of being factual. We're more concerned about why people believe and what people believe. So we're at no point going to try to disprove anything with this study. We're just interested in what you believe and how you come to those beliefs.
Appreciate that.
So, Chad, if you wouldn't mind clicking to the next slide.
Yep.
Thank you very much. So this is a little bit more about the term that we use, supernatural. This is a quote from a sociologist, Peter Berger. And I use, in the interest of full disclosure, the material in these slides is coming directly from the class that I teach, which Sean has taught with me in the past on... But the title of the course is History of Monsters, Aliens, and the Supernatural. So the word supernatural for Peter Berger suggests the assertion or belief that there is an other reality and one of ultimate significance for man, which transcends the reality within which our everyday experience unfolds. This is a bit of a dated definition. It's from 1970. So there are some things that on an academic level we could maybe punch some holes in. But I think it's useful to begin a conversation with, because first and foremost, in the context of this conversation, it shows, in line with what Sean was just saying, that we always approach this material with respect and an understanding that the things that are encompassed by this term are important to people. The idea that these phenomena or experiences are important to people is what we're interested in understanding more about. Again, as Sean said, not necessarily the veracity of phenomena or the interpretations of phenomena per se, but rather why they matter in people's lives and how they impact other areas of people's lives. So that's kind of one of the guiding assumptions of this category called the supernatural. Whatever it is, it's outside of ordinary experience, but it's important for people. Next slide, if you would, please. So as folklorists, we often get questions that in some ways might actually be sort of similar to the questions that you guys get as paranormal investigators, by which I mean that the words that we use, the language that we use, is a part of ordinary conversation, but it also has more specialized meanings. So when we as folklorists use the word folklore, we tend to mean something pretty specific. But in ordinary conversation, when people use that word, they often mean a different set of things. I think when people hear the word folklore in ordinary usage, they often think old stories. I think that's the number one assumption. Old stories that maybe aren't really relevant anymore. Maybe you heard them growing up or you read them in a dusty book somewhere, and they might be quaint or kind of interesting, but not really relevant in the contemporary world. We can, of course, talk about old stories as examples of folk expression, but we take kind of a different view within the discipline. For folklorists as academics, this is one of the most sort of long-standing and serviceable new definitions of folklore. Of course, it's not new anymore. It's also from the early 1970s, but new compared to the old stories understanding of folklore. Mm-hmm. This comes from a folklorist named Dan Benamos. He says that folklore is artistic communication in small groups. As with the Berger quote from before, we can kind of punch some holes in this from a contemporary perspective. One of the most immediate things is that the groups involved in folkloric communication don't have to be small. can be any group of people at all who do folklore can be doing folklore. But whatever else folklore is, it's artistic or creative or expressive in some way, and it communicates something, thoughts or values, ideas, ideals that are understandable within the context of a particular group, however that group is defined. But they might not be understandable outside of the context of that group.
Interesting. I mean, I like the definition. It sort of narrows it down, but opens it up at the same time.
One of the things that I don't know if this has been your experience, Sean, but when I was in grad school, an experience that I had was thinking that the study of folklore could really encompass anything at all that I wanted it to. I could justify anything as a kind of folklore. Has that been your experience too, Sean?
That has primarily been my experience. Yeah, you can find pretty much anything. I mean, there are other folklorists who say that a group can be as small as a dyad. So you may have folklore between yourself and a friend or a sibling. So if you can mold it to fit this definition or the myriad other definitions of folklore that you might encounter, you can certainly study it.
Yeah. That's a great point. There are one of the sort of internal problems that folklore as a scholarly field has is that there are a bajillion, that's a technical term, a bajillion definitions. And no two folklorists are likely to agree exactly on what actually constitutes folklore. But I think this definition, although it has some issues, it highlights some of the things that are our major focuses, the idea of group, the idea of communication. Another influential approach to the study of folklore is by another folklorist named Barry Tolkien, who talked a lot about how the forces of what he called conservatism and dynamism are really important in understanding folklore. All that means, it sounds fancy, but all that means is conservatism is stuff staying the same over time. Dynamism is stuff changing over time. And what he really means by this is that whatever we refer to as folklore exists in different versions through time and space. So if we're talking about a particular storytelling tradition, for example, like Cinderella, there is a core narrative that remains relatively stable from one telling of the Cinderella folktale to the next. But many, many aspects of that narrative can change, in some cases quite drastically, from one telling to the next. An example that we like to give in classes that we teach is the telephone game. Did you all ever play the telephone game?
We talk about it all the time, actually.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, really? Yeah. That's a good kind of illustration of the ideas of tradition and variation. And I think most often when that's done in a classroom context, you really see a lot of variation and maybe not a lot of tradition. Oh, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself there. Conservatism and dynamism are the words that this folklorist Barry Tolkien used, but we more frequently we refer to those as simply tradition or sameness and stability, and variation or change. And the telephone game, anyway, is a good illustrator of those.
Is it something like the concept of a memory is a copy of a memory, and therefore is variant? It has a variant every time you go back to it. That principle, at least. So as you're in the moment, your first copy is the moment, and then your remembrance is another copy, which therefore is slightly altered. And by the time years go by, what you recall, and this is where it always helps to have a second in the moment with you, because then you start arguing, over what really happened, and your version is uniquely different in some way, anyway, than the other's remembrance as well. I can see how that occurs then in the tale, the telling of a tale over time. It's going to vary based on, and I'm going to say something here, maybe slightly off point, but I've heard this before, and I think it was college for me back in the day. But when you're telling a story, you're always the hero of it. So you're embellishing the story, and at least a tweak of it to make it be good for you as the storyteller to tell, and therefore automatically it's not original anymore to the original content.
Yeah, well, actually, that's a good segue to the next slide, Jamie. If you wouldn't mind, Chad, you pointed out something really important. So where supernatural belief is concerned, at least if we're talking about the present day, We divide folklore into a lot of different categories and genres. And one of the categories of folklore is what's called verbal arts, which just means any form of verbal traditional expression. And narrative verbal genres are simply stories that get traditionalized. They get told and retold and changed, but also maybe some elements stay the same. And one of the verbal genres that is most relevant to this project that we're working on, and I think to what all of you do, is the genre called personal narrative, which is simply a story about one's own experiences told in the first person. And that connects very directly to the idea of memory and how memory is inherently flawed. Memory is generative. It's every time we have a memory, we're generating that memory kind of anew. And so, yeah, we can see tradition and variation in the telling of personal narratives, even when we're trying very hard to be consistent. Maybe the content will remain very stable and traditional, but aspects of how we tell the story might change. We might choose to emphasize some parts over other parts, for example, or our tone of voice might change from one telling to the next, or other incidental things might happen. We might sneeze in the middle of one recitation of a story, but not in a subsequent one. And all of those things contribute to changes, but also stability over time.
Well, I think an example of that might be when we're doing our history at the beginning of our investigations. Typically, we have David do the history, but if David's not there, somebody else will do it. So your history is just a little bit different. And to be honest with you, I guess every time David tells it, there's a different point that's highlighted or emphasized, or so every time we do that, the history probably changes just a little bit here and there. Is it?
No, it's a scripted history, so technically that shouldn't happen, right?
Right.
Because he's reading, a page of documented information. However, the anecdotal pieces that get peppered in from experience are that is the variable at that point. And it is uniquely different sometimes depending on maybe it's even on mood. And I'm not challenging Dave's mood.
No, not at all.
It's there, but that part of it, knowing reading the room. I worked in the nonprofit world for a very long time and in resource development. I went out and did campaign presentations, try to raise money, and you have to read the room. If you're sitting in front of a bunch of welders at 12:30 on the third shift, it's their lunch break kind of window. You're not going to get that. You're not going to get a lot of enthusiasm, right? And there's an old adage that facts tell and stories sell. So if you can come up with a presentation that provides facts and data, you're going to meet some people there. And if you're going to tell a heart story, some touch point story, if you can blend those two pieces together, you're probably going to capture everybody somehow in the room. Mm-hmm. But you got to read the room. And I think that's part of what your point, Chad, is that it's that moment for that presentation of information. The facts are the same every time. Mm-hmm. Because the script is all of that because it's documented. But the reality is that it gets tweaked literally based on the mood in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So what you guys are hitting on kind of drives home the notion of performativity in folklore, and the sort of idea of text, texture, and context, which we get from a guy named Alan Dundas. So it's like you have the text, right? So that's the item, like that's the message itself. And then you also have the texture, which is what you're indicating, this sort of stylistic way in which that information is conveyed. And then the context is going to change necessarily based on who your audience is and just the vibe of the room. That's also a technical term. Jeff?
Yeah, we're very concerned with vibes.
What's the thing, right? And it's like a first impression. In our bit, you've been there, so you've seen this, kick off, and we only have one shot at this to engage, 30 people. Some who don't want to be there, some who are really enthusiastic to be there. So we're trying to bring everybody in to get them into the in the moment we're at, and it's hard because not everybody gives cues, to their engagement.
Oh yeah.
And so, you're trying to find the medium of it all, the middle of it all.
Right.
And you don't always know whether you hit the mark or not until you're in the practice of a session, moving along.
And you talk about the vibe, sort of joking about it, but the vibe in an investigation is very important. You can have a vibe where it's, oh, sorry, Jamie, I was getting ready to put that up too. You have a vibe where you can tell there's nothing happening. And then there's other times when you can walk in and it's like, oh, this room is so full of energy. So, yeah,
And that's not just the people. That's not just the living people in the room. That's the spirits as well. There are times when we just don't get much activity, and it's bad. It's probably a bad pun to say it's dead, but it's a term we all know. But that happens as well, and there are times when there is a lot of energy or a lot of activity, which we equate to energy, and equipment's active, and that engages people more than anything. That moment when something happens, because that's the cue that we're all expecting, because that's the content we see elsewhere in all the other media presentations that people can turn a channel to or click on anywhere, and they know that's the part of it we all want. And sure, right, but you've heard us say this, that it's not on demand, regardless of how much we want it to be, and or how engaged we all are, or interested, invested we all are. It simply just doesn't happen because we want it to. And that's the frustration in the process too, because people just expect it, because you see it happen on TV all the time, or YouTube, or wherever you're getting your content from.
I didn't mean to take us down a rabbit hole, but just following up with Bert's comment here. He says, I would think it also matters who your audience is. You change your key points and the way you are telling the tale story, which, Sean, I think that ties back to exactly what you were saying.
That's absolutely context. Performance is something that's going to change based on where you are, who's around, whether or not you ate that morning. So, I mean, that's the performance of this sort of verbal art that you guys are engaged in all the time. And we've seen you do it a few times now, and it's always different, and it's always enlightening and entertaining. So.
Yeah, I agree. And you're right. The more I think about it, we don't do it the same way every time. And just the pace is different, the anecdotal things. And that, going back a step further, with relation to telling the story, with us, if we didn't capture something on audio or on video, it is an anecdote. It's our story of something that occurred to us or with us in the space we were at in the time. And because we have no evidence to prove it one way or the other. And we use that a lot as the bonus of a situation, because at least we can say something happened. And I would like to think that our team doesn't embellish those stories. It's just a factual thing. Okay, we had equipment go off, but we didn't have a voice recorder running, so we couldn't hear the equipment sounding off, or our audio or video, was facing the different direction from the device, and therefore we didn't see it on camera. Therefore, it technically happened because we all saw it. We have no evidence, and evidence is everything in this field. Sadly, and I'm going a slightly different direction here, but sadly, there's sort of a competition to get things to the public view, because that's going to get you something, credibility or notoriety, whatever it may be. I don't think we look at it that way. It's just an expansion of the opportunity to engage a conversation around what we all believe is happening. And what did you see? What did you hear? What was it you got from that? And it is, though, the only thing you really have sometimes, because we're all out there walking around in the dark talking to ourselves otherwise, with nothing to prove it happening.
That sounds like a pretty powerful metaphor for life in general, honestly, Jamie.
True.
Well, with respect to evidence, it depends on who is looking at that information. So for you guys, anecdote might not be seen as strong enough evidence to support your claims. But for us, working in folklore as ethnographers, the anecdotes that you have are our evidence. So we love to hear these sort of anecdotal stories, irrespective of whether or not they actually prove the veracity of the claims about the supernatural. They're still valuable to us, and we love hearing it.
Okay, I appreciate that. And it's not to say it's not taken seriously or not credible. It's just not there's no other physical evidence other than the story.
Right. And I think that goes to what you were talking about earlier about whether we have the scientific side or it's just the folklore side. Is that am I stretching there, or is that?
Well, we definitely are. We're very interested in understanding how, like, what constitutes evidence for all of you engaged in paranormal investigation, as well as your audiences, meaning maybe the people who come to public events or people to whom you make your material available after the fact. What counts as proof for them?
Mm-hmm.
But interestingly, where belief stuff is concerned, and this doesn't only mean supernatural belief. I mean, this means, like, if you walk past your stove in your house and you see that one of the burners is glowing red, you probably believe, maybe based on experience, that certain things are going to happen if you put your hand on that glowing red burner, right? Like, the proof, so to speak, that helped you make up your mind about the potential results of interacting with that glowing red burner might not satisfy a laboratory experiment. It might not have been conducted in, controlled, repeatable, quote unquote, scientific contexts, but it still counts as evidence in that it affected your understanding of the world and how things in the world work and how you should or should not relate to things in the world. So Sean's point about the narratives that you generate doing the work that you do, counting as a kind of evidence, is really at the heart of what we're looking at here. And the genre that's listed here, personal narrative, is, again, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about people's stories of experiences that they've had that might be anomalous, might not be part of sort of what I sometimes refer to, maybe problematically, as consensus reality. But they nevertheless are important to people for all kinds of reasons. And the reasons that they're important might not have anything to do with, scientifically acceptable proof or evidence, but people know what they saw, or they know what they felt, or they know what they experienced. And that has meaning too.
Yeah.
Like, we know that we like chocolate because we like how it tastes, or we know that we don't like cilantro because it tastes like soap if you're a mutant like me and have that genetic thing where it tastes like soap. I don't have science to back up my claim that cilantro tastes like soap to me, but it does taste like soap to me. That actually segues nicely into the next slide, if you wouldn't mind there, Chad.
You got it.
So this is a pretty famous painting. This is Henry Fuseli's The Nightmare. I'm sure you guys have seen it, or maybe a variation of it before. We're fond of using this as an illustration of work done by a folklorist named David Hufford. David Hufford is a very important scholar in the folkloristic study of supernatural belief and experience, because he made a really basic argument that you guys are probably going to be like, yeah, no crap, we knew that already. But it was an important argument to be made in the context of scholarship, because up until this point, scholars tended to be quite dismissive of supernatural or anomalous experience. So Hufford taught in Memorial University up in Newfoundland in Canada, and he encountered stories there of this phenomenon that he came to refer to as the old hag. This is an experience that people would have where they would be asleep and wake up and feel as if they can't move. They experience a sense of fear. Maybe there's a presence in the room with them that wishes them harm. They might experience a feeling like being strangled or having a weight pressing down on their chest. Sean, am I forgetting anything?
The overwhelming terror of it all.
The overwhelming terror of it. Yeah. This might sound familiar. I saw you guys nodding as I was describing that. Well, Hufford found that in Newfoundland, where he worked, there was a pre-existing supernatural belief and tradition associated with this. People believed that what was happening was that someone in the community was spiritually attacking you, sort of similar to the evil eye in a way. Maybe they were jealous of you and they were sending out their spirit to cause you harm, maybe inadvertently. But Hufford discovered that other people in other places had experiences that mimicked the basic experiences of the old hag. Again, waking up, feeling afraid, not being able to move, even in contexts where there was no pre-existing belief system to explain it. So they didn't have a pre-existing supernatural idea about what was happening. They just had this experience, and maybe they didn't have any framework for understanding it at all. So Hufford realized that this occurred. He called these core experiences. He listed out a set of core elements that are always the same in occurrences of this phenomenon. And eventually, he was able to determine that what is happening physiologically to people when they have this experience. And he kind of bracketed the supernatural. He said, I can't address whether or not something supernatural is actually happening here. But what I can do is I can look at what's happening to the human body while this experience is going on. And he found that people who had all of these core experiences that he called the old hag phenomenon were experiencing a combination of sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucination. Again, that doesn't mean that there's not a supernatural element. He can't. We as scholars, we can't address that. So we bracket it. We kind of set that to the side, and we say this is what's happening to the body and the brain.
Yeah.
And all
Eric,
of this,
yeah,
yes,
Eric,
that's right. Sleep paralysis, exactly right. So this all led Hufford to develop what he calls the experiential approach to the study of belief. And at its core, all this means is that sometimes when people tell us an account of an anomalous experience, they'll tell us that something really weird happened to them. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they did have an experience. Sometimes something really weird did happen. And instead of rejecting it out of hand, we scholars should assume that there was some experience that was important enough to the person that they're now going to narrate it for us. That doesn't mean we have to accept a post hoc supernatural interpretation of the event, but we should begin not by rejecting it out of hand. That probably seems really obvious to you guys given the work that you do, but this was an important point for Hufford to make and has guided folklorists in dealing with the supernatural ever since then.
When did Hufford study?
The book in which he had addressed the old hag phenomenon is called The Terror That Comes in the Night, and it was published in the early 1980s. I think 1982. Let me double check. Yes, 1982, The Terror That Comes in the Night.
So it's a fairly contemporary teaching.
Well, it's a little bit dated as scholarship goes. Scholarly publication moves pretty fast. But Hufford has maintained his experiential approach since then. And he's continued to write things in this vein and develop the experiential approach. And folklorists still tend to follow in his wake.
Cool.
So it is contemporary in that sense, yeah.
Okay.
Let me add something to that, and this is a bit of color. So we occasionally are requested by individuals to come and do what we would consider a private investigation, something in someone's home. They're having an episode of some kind, and they've found us, however may be, and we're certainly willing to do this. We hope whenever we can. A particular couple were having issues with several things in their home, but one of them is a lot of what you've described. And what we would call sleep paralysis, but also some lucid dreams, just erratic behavior, and all of it is occurring either at night or in the waking and sleeping window, getting to bed, getting up. And one of the things that we do, of course, we interview. So we walk through the situation they're experiencing. And then we were able to do a sweep of the property of the home with equipment. And one of the simple things is a K2 device. It measures electromagnetic energy. And as we got to the bedroom, we found that their bed was against a wall, which is right next to a closet, sliding door. And opening the closet, right there is surprisingly an electrical box. And that box was popping the device all the way up to max. It was red. And, and everybody, this is one of those moments where everybody deals with certain things differently, environmental, elemental things. But one of the key factors with extra electromagnetic energy is it can create all of the cases that they were dealing with in their night. And they were sleeping inches away from it, essentially. So a truly environmental thing. Yeah. And our recommendation was to rearrange the room so that the bed can get farther away. And, obviously, they weren't going to get the electrical box rewired or anything like that. It was unreasonable. It was a rental unit as well, so an apartment unit. So, we're going to have to make the best of it, but adjust. And in follow up shortly after, a couple weeks later, we found that part of their experiences had lessened a lot simply by moving the bed to another wall across the room. And we don't ever want to tell somebody that what they're experiencing isn't true to them. That is the horriblest thing we could possibly do. But what we'll say is that there are times when it's going to be an environmental situation, and we will try to take away, and this goes to the term paranormal or supernatural either way. Paranormal means it's beyond normal. And we will try to find all of the normal things that it could be first. So if someone's experiencing a cold spot, has the HVAC system kicked on at the place? Is there now airflow moving in the room? Or is there lighting? And the Boobies Brewery space is a great example, especially the ballroom. It's on a street. It's a public street, so cars go by all the time, and that creates light play and shadows and so forth. And we have to take that into consideration as much as we do the fact that someone had an experience. And if we can take away all the things that were normal or natural, what's left is either paranormal or supernatural, beyond natural, right? So I have no issue with either of those terms, and I think they both are very appropriate because it's telling you it's something that's just beyond the norm.
Mm-hmm.
But we're never going to tell somebody you didn't have an experience. Certainly not. That's the worst thing we could. That's insulting, actually. Because we want someone to believe us when we say the same, and try to figure it out.
And we don't know also whether, like, having that strong EMF that may be affecting them physically, but it also may be creating the opportunity for something paranormal to happen by pulling that energy. So we there's just so much of it we don't understand yet. So it could be a combination of all these factors.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
sorry, Sean, go ahead.
We always do this. We talk over each other. It happens. So one thing that I've found with supernatural belief in particular, but belief in general more broadly as well, is that what you see is a sort of accretion of experience within the overlaying of the cultural attitudes on it. So if somebody experiences something like what you're telling us now over and over again, cold spots, or maybe they start to feel uncomfortable because perhaps EMF or whatever, if they have that sort of cultural lens to explain it in a supernatural way, then their belief becomes reified. That is to say, it becomes stronger. And that's sort of what Jeff is alluding to here in talking about the old hag or the terror that comes in the night. It's kind of what's happening. There's an overlay of both happen at once.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to throw this in as well. Erica has a medical background. A more scientific medical explanation of sleep paralysis, Tylenol PM will cause it. As a medical professional, people don't realize that the old hag choking sensation is your breathing becoming shallow during normal sleep cycles.
That's fascinating.
That is fascinating. But again, if you have that sort of cultural lens or explanation for that behavior, even though you may not understand that choking sensation is caused by, breathing becoming more shallow, you have a ready-made explanation for it that trends towards something like the supernatural. Now, that's not to dismiss supernatural belief or to suggest that it's not true or couldn't possibly be true. It's just to explain sort of how these beliefs become stronger. Mm-hmm. At least that's my theory.
I think we're always looking for explanation, and part of that's religion. Or religion has given us explanation and guidance over the years for so many things, and I think so has folklore. And careful how I say this, but religion is folklore. I mean, it's just been handed down and turned into something greater, but it's folklore. It is, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, one of the reasons that we tend to favor the term supernatural over paranormal is that supernatural also includes things that typically fall under the auspices of organized religion. So God is supernatural, angels are supernatural, demons are, all of that is included under the term supernatural. So yeah, you're hitting on something important, Chad, for sure.
Of course, that can be a difficult conversation to have with people when you say your religion contains mythology, particularly when the popular parlance for the term mythology tends to be or falsehood or
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, a myth for a folklorist, a myth is a sacred, true creation story, a sacred truth about how the world came into being or how features of it came into being. But of course, as Sean says, in ordinary language, myth usually just means some bullshit.
Yeah, and in teaching religion classes and explaining to students that their religious practices actually do contain mythology, you'll get a few stunned looks and a couple of sort of angry, shaky fists from
Mm-hmm.
students behind their books. But
Well, and you're probably dealing with students, not always, but students have. This is the first time their theology's been challenged in the
Yeah.
college sense. It's just what they've grown up believing.
Or they can clearly see the parallels between several, and therefore, is this the only,
Right.
the one true? And that's interesting. I recall that moment happening in college as well. That was a freshman, 101 course, but it was eye opening. I went away to college in a different place in the Southwest from here in South Central PA, and I was already a minority at that point, and then having my mind expanded to all of these other things of the world that are far beyond my closed window of faith, was an all moment for me, and an aha moment, I should say. And then I haven't looked
Definitely.
back to that, so that's great.
Well, yeah, the ways in which people kind of make and remake their own personal belief systems, again, is kind of at the heart of what we're interested in learning about. And
Mm-hmm.
Hufford's work contributes to our approach to that, in that Hufford is talking through his experiential approach. He's talking not only about individual experiences, but he's talking about the formation of whole traditions of belief. So the idea is that the old hag phenomenon, regardless of what is really causing it, and I hope you see the air quotes that I'm putting, whatever's really causing it, the fact is that people are having an experience, and that experience is contributing to a tradition of storytelling and belief.
Mm-hmm.
And that tradition of storytelling and belief is, and this is also really important, and I think you guys will appreciate it, that tradition, because it's based on experiences that people are having, is rational. There's a strong tendency in the Western world. I'm sure you guys have encountered this when you have those skeptics who come to your events. There's a strong tendency to assume that people who claim to have had supernatural experiences are somehow being irrational. But that is a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be rational. It's entirely possible. I always say this in my monsters class. It's entirely possible to follow a strict process of logic, of reasoning, and arrive at an incorrect conclusion. Being incorrect is not the same as being irrational.
Yeah.
So Hufford makes the point that it is possible to have these kinds of beliefs in a very rational way. They can develop from observations that are made rationally when a person is in their right mind, not when they're stoned or high or whatever, but actually when they're observing things carefully and with an eye to being careful in their observations. And that can still contribute to forms of knowledge and belief that don't necessarily match up with Western scientific knowledge and belief. But nevertheless, they are rational because they're based on seriously, carefully observed experiences and phenomena. And that actually kind of brings me to the last, I think it's the last slide. This is an idea put forth by another folklorist, Diane Goldstein. She argues that when people tell their personal stories of encounters with the supernatural, they tend to tell these stories as though one were on the witness stand, detailed and careful, incorporating numerous strategies that outline the nature of the observations, the testing of alternative explanations, and often including an indication of reluctance to interpret what occurred as supernatural. This is a strategy that people have in Western contexts for sharing these stories, because they know that mainstream Western culture isn't really accepting of these kinds of narratives. So they build in these strategies to show that they're not crazy, that they're rational, careful observers of their world. So this is building on Hufford's work to show again that processes of belief that are based on experience can in fact be very rational and concerned with rationality. Like I'm I'm providing as much contextual detail as I can. I'm indicating that I've considered other possibilities about what happened. Maybe it is an electrical thing. Maybe it is a weather phenomenon. Maybe there's a pipe that burst under there, and that's responsible for the cold spot in my house, or whatever.
Right.
Again, this probably sounds like really obvious to you guys, because this stacks with what you do in a really close
This is
way.
what we would describe as a skeptical believer, I believe.
Yeah.
When you say, Jamie, like
Yeah. Actually, I do. I'm thinking a lot of that.
Really?
Yeah. Because
And I'm going to shock you by telling you this, but that's what we are. I'm not going to just. I can't tell you. I can tell you for myself that I am skeptical of everything that we come across. I want to find the rational reasoning first, and again, try to remove the normalcies or the naturals, and then what is left after then is either the paranormal or supernatural, whatever you wish to call it. But for me, I need to find those other things first. I'm just not going to say it's paranormal automatically or supernatural automatically. I need to see the other stuff first and take away those things.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There have been times in investigations where we'll spend half hour, 45 minutes after an investigation going back and recreating the situation and seeing, that was a light coming in from the street. Or let's go measure the EMF. Oh, when the lights are on, like in the ballroom at the brewery, when the lights are on, or especially when they're in a dimming position but not quite on or not off, they throw off a huge amount of EMF, and it'll throw all the gear off until they're completely turned off and there's no power going to them.
Yeah, and you've been in that room. The very back end of that room has a large mirror, and we focus on that area because there was activity around some of the children of the household, and as everybody's facing that way, if there is someone at the very front of the room, which would be the front point of the building, the exterior wall, across the street, there is a very bright spotlight on the HVAC building. And all it takes is for somebody to walk across those windows, and it casts a shadow the entire length of that building or that room. And if they're moving left to right, there it goes across that wall. And we've captured that on video a couple times. And the first time, of course, we had to figure out what it could be, because that's the first time we actually caught it. And we spent quite a lot of time. And this was in a past episode, actually, way back in season 1. We showed it and experienced the debunking of it, just to prove that not everything is paranormal. We have to look to go further than just accepting it. And it's do justice that way too. I mean, if you're putting out false information, false evidence, that is not helping the field and credibility or anything that would be giving us any kind of positivity. It's just a whole bunch of people running around and trying to get a scare. And that's not what we do. It's not what we do as a team, but it's not what I think most folks who are in the field and investing their time and energy and capital do for this. And that's not how we support each other.
We're not a Halloween haunt, which there's plenty of those, and they have their place, and
Sure,
if that's
they
what
do.
people want, great, but that's not what we do. So, as Bert threw this comment up there, always try to debunk first.
Absolutely. There's a word here I think that's missing, and for me at least, it is trust. So going back a little bit to the old hag, so if I'm the person experiencing that situation, what's the first thing you do once you're clear of it? You grab your phone, right, and you start. And if you Google all of those experiences, those symptoms, if you will, you're going to
hopefully you don't wind up on WebMD, because it always leads you to one ultimate conclusion.
Yeah, you're done, right? So that is where it takes you. It takes you to medical things. You're not going to find it's an old hag on Google. So how do you get to that? You tell somebody else about it. You expand the situation to someone else. You tell a story. Your story, and that person will say, "Well, that's the old hag." And at that point, you have a moment of trust, because that person is a resource for you. You wouldn't tell them this without them being trusted. And then they'll tell you what their belief of it is, and therefore you believe them. And that moment, you go far away from the science of it, because the science was on your phone. It could be all of these things, but now you're in the soft side of it versus the fact hard side of it. And I think we want to be there. We want that to some degree. And maybe we even need it to give us a different, just a perspective. And there are those who probably never had what would be considered a paranormal experience or supernatural experience before that, but they're told to believe that it was one, and therefore they did, whether it is or not. And I
Oh,
think that's a really
definitely.
interesting
Yeah.
tipping point here. I know it happens.
Right. And I'm going to bring up Heather's comment here, and you guys really need to meet Heather and Bert. They're
Yes.
honorary members of
Would
our
love to.
team. And Heather, they're both sensitives. I was going to say Heather's a sensitive. They're both sensitives, but Heather's really developed her skills. And she said, when I first started having experiences, I would always add in all the ways I was not crazy when I would
Yeah.
tell people about them. After years of having experiences, I just tell what I feel and hear. It is what it is. What it is. I feel I've grown into it. I'm not explaining. I'm not crazy to anyone anymore.
Yeah. Good on you, Heather.
Yeah.
That's good to hear.
That's a great place to be, but it does sound like you at least started on the narrative witness stand and you've moved yourself from that stand to more of a stance of being an expert, which is great. And I think that comes through with this sort of, again, reifying of experience that happens over time.
I think most people who are sensitives have to develop that understanding that what they're experiencing is something, and that because I go through it myself. I have a lot of self-doubt, and I'm trying to look for proof other ways before I want to share that with people. And it's gotten to the point where it's like I got to get past that, and we'll be investigating, and Jamie will look at me and say like, well, what do you feel?
Yeah.
And so he trusts me more than I trust me sometimes.
Yeah. And I'll say this: I'm unsensitive. I have no sensitivity to the supernatural, paranormal, and I still have trouble at times telling people what I do. So, the witness stand part of it, I have to explain. I feel like I have to explain what I do before I tell them something about it. And, most people know what this is now. This is not a shadow element anymore. It's not like on the backside of things. It's just now very public and very accessible, based on media options and programs and so forth. And everybody has a story of some kind of their own they've either experienced or heard directly from someone they trust. So it's not out there anymore. It's not on the edge anymore. But it took me a long time to get to the place where I was comfortable. And you find your people that way to
Right.
some degree. And as soon as you start, someone will be like, "Oh my gosh, you do that too, or you do that, and what is it like?" It leads to a whole other conversation. People, a side of people you never knew, and most times it's a good thing, mostly. But it's interesting because I get it, even though I don't have the sensitivity. I get that part of it because it's you're allowing people, you're asking them to trust what you're telling them is something that's true and real, and it goes back to the whole present premise of trust, I guess. But you're really putting yourself out there at that point, and it's dangling for a moment until you get a response.
Okay. Now, I know Jamie and I both grew up in haunted houses, and I know at least one other of our team members. Jamie, is your experience growing up? Is it something you would talk about with your peers?
No.
Yeah,
No.
same here.
Never.
It's like sometimes it was like, oh, you live in that house? That's the haunted house, and that was like as close as people would get, and they didn't want to hear anything.
Oh.
So,
Yeah.
but we've had plenty of experiences. There's an episode I did earlier this year on the experiences in my house growing up, and there's a lot that happened. And as Bert says here, people are more accepting. They don't cross the street they don't cross the street anymore.
Yeah. Well, some people still whistle past the graveyard, though. So,
Or
Yeah.
hold their breath.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to offend the
but
dead.
they're not doing the fingers in the ears and la la la.
Yeah.
That's better.
I just this moment I pulled up a Gallup, a summary of a Gallup poll on Gallup's own website. The poll, apparently it was specifically about paranormal phenomena, and it was just conducted between May 1st and May 18th of this year, so it's quite recent. And according to this poll, 39% of Americans, 39%, believe in ghosts or that spirits of dead people can come back in certain places and situations. And 19% of Americans say they're not sure. That's quite a high number.
Mm-hmm.
So according to this poll, 42% said flat out that they do not believe in ghosts. But 39% said that they do, and 19% said they weren't sure. That's a pretty high number. That suggests that belief in ghosts or spirits is quite prevalent.
And I think that number goes back about 10 years. That it's if you look back, because I've done some looking into this before as well. And
Oh, yeah?
that 39-40% of people who believe is pretty high. And it's also interesting when you start looking at people who say they've had experiences. That number is probably higher than you would expect it to be as well. So
I would believe it, Chad, for sure. It's I point it out mostly because we have this tendency in public discourse in the U.S. to assume that the supernatural is not really, that's kind of forbidden ground, right? We don't accept it, we don't believe it, we don't buy, and yet the numbers tell a different story. So there's an interesting contrast between sort of public or official cultural discourses about supernatural belief and what people claim to actually think about their world. And I find that discrepancy to be really, really interesting.
Well, it's interesting. One of the venues that the team used to investigate, one of the theaters that I used to work at, there a lot of these places don't want to do paranormal investigations. They don't want to talk about the ghosts. They don't want to talk about things like that. But there's always people asking about it, saying that place is haunted. That place has a great activity. So it's interesting. Like there's more and more that I think it's going to keep changing in the future. That we're going to get more and more people who are accepting and understanding it. So
I have no doubt that you're right. And there are all kinds of social contexts and changes and historical trends and things that can contribute to that. We've seen it in the past, belief spikes in the wake of certain kinds of events, for example.
Now, this could be a whole separate episode. And I know we're talking about Western culture. Have you looked and compared and contrasted Eastern culture and what things look like there?
Well, that's an interesting question. Not in a formal way, although I'm in the process of writing up a grant application to maybe do some related research in Japan. I can only speak. I've lived in Japan a bit and for a couple of years, so I can only speak to my experiences of Japanese culture, and only then only in kind of a partial way. But what I can say is that ghosts are a much more prominent part of sort of Japanese quote unquote official culture than they are of Western culture. So, for example, August in Japan is the month of Obon, which is the holiday that celebrates and honors the ancestors, the spirits of the ancestors. So, and of course, Buddhism is prevalent in Japan, and ghosts are a part of Buddhist belief in cosmology. The ghost realm is a level of reincarnation. If you've accumulated too much negative karma, after you die, you may become a hungry ghost.
Well, I actually did an episode. Was it last year?
Yeah.
Was it last year?
Oh, really?
Yeah. Basically skimming over the highlights of it, but yeah, we talked about a lot of these things. So it's interesting that you're bringing them up, having lived there and experienced them in person. So
well, don't let me misrepresent myself. Well, I wasn't officially studying supernatural stuff while I was there, but I do find it interesting that different cultural contexts give different sort of arsenals of language and ideas to possibly name different kinds of experiences. And the U.S. is, we have this official public rejection of the supernatural, but again, the numbers maybe tell a somewhat different story. But Sean, you look like you wanted to jump in.
Oh, I was just thinking that, there are some historians of religion that, though not super in vogue within the academy right now, I'm thinking of Eliade in particular, have argued that the rise of new religious movements are a result of some sort of innate desire in humanity toward sacrality. And I can't speak to the veracity of it, but I do like the argument. So that may explain some of this. But anyway.
Sure. Yeah. For sure.
Sticking to the Eastern religion, this is interesting to us and we're going to talk about it later in the month. But this month of September is Ghost Month in China. So, as a national thing, and we don't think of it being a very open culture to us here in the West, but that is something that intrigued us, and we did a few episodes on urban legends, and one of them was international. And in the research I did for that, there was a lot that came through this area of the world, whether it be China, Japan, North and South Korea, Vietnam. There was just a lot of them that I can only cover one or two per country in the scale of trying to go around the world, but there could be a full episode just on the area, the region, with urban legends, which I think can tie directly here as well. In at least it is a version of folklore to me, and you can please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're exactly right. If you remember back to that, don't worry, Chad, you don't have to pull it up again. But if you remember one of the slides that I had before talking about the different genres of verbal folklore, one of the genres was legend. And legend is also extremely important in the study of the supernatural. A legend for folklorists, Sean pointed out before that like the term myth often simply means like a false belief or a false narrative. Oh, thank you, Chad. Often I think people use the term legend in almost a similar way. It almost means the same thing. And in a general sense, people use myth and legend almost interchangeably in ordinary language. But for folklorists... What's that?
Much to my chagrin, but yes.
Yeah, mine too. For folklorists, they are really very, very different kinds of narratives. They have in common the fact that they are narratives, but the similarities almost end there. A myth folklorists tend to understand a myth as a sacred, this is a fancy word, a cosmogonic narrative. That is to say, a narrative about how the universe or the world or some feature of the world came into being. And we usually regard myth, and I'm following a folklorist here named William Bascom. We usually regard myths as being either outside of ordinary history or maybe set at the beginning of history or when things were in kind of a proto state, not exactly the way they are today. Legends, by contrast, legends are historical narratives. They're narratives that are set in real history. They might be set in the very distant past, but they're still set in the real world. I shouldn't say the real world. They're set in the historical world, and they make truth claims about historical events. Legends are told as if they're true or possibly true, but they're always subject to debate. They're always testable, and people, in fact, like to test and argue about the veracity of legends. What folklorists used to call urban legends, we now prefer to call, most folklorists now prefer to call them contemporary legends. And I won't bore you with all of the reasons for that, but one of the major reasons, though, is that these kinds of stories don't have to have anything remotely urban about them at all. Right. So that the term urban is really just kind of a misnomer. So contemporary legend is a little bit more accurate because it emphasizes that unlike some legends, like a legend about King Arthur, for example, contemporary legends are closer to the tellers and audiences in time and in space. So contemporary legends are localized, they happen nearby, they happen close to us. Oftentimes, at least in Anglophone contexts, these stories are framed as having happened to a friend of a friend. And in fact, that formulation, a friend of a friend, happens so often in the telling of these stories that folklorists have actually abbreviated it to FOF. And FOAF. And for a while, there was even a folklore newsletter. I think it was called Fof Tales or something like that. I'm not sure if it still exists or not. But regardless of how we slice up those subgenres, a legend is a narrative that makes historical truth claims about the world. It says this happened, these people or these beings were involved. And maybe most importantly, at least most interesting to me, is that they happened in specific places. And that means because a legend narrative happened in a specific place, that means that it is maybe potentially possible for you, whoever you are, to go to that place and experience some aspect of that legend for yourself. Obviously, this is important where the supernatural is concerned, because a legend is often the narrative that tells us how a place came to be haunted, what happened that led to this place being the way it is now. We can do what folklorists refer to as legend tripping. We can visit the place associated with the legend, and maybe we can see the ghost for ourselves. So there's an experiential possibility with legends that I find really interesting. And personal narratives, that is a story about my own experience, can grow out of a legend trip or a paranormal investigation, which, in the interest of full disclosure, from our perspective as folklorists, paranormal investigation would count as a kind of legend tripping.
Sure. I get that.
Yeah.
One of the things I found in looking through a lot of these, and you're right, there's some tips or some tells immediately. A friend of a friend, it's a passed down story.
Mm-hmm.
There is it's just believable enough that it could be true,
Mm-hmm.
but somewhere something's clicking to say this isn't real. And that's another automatic tell. But one thing that I think is consistent in most of them, if not all, is that there is some warning of doing something. And I say that and one of the great ones, of course, is the people going parking, naked and whatever you want to call it, out in the edge of the woods and
Lover's Lane. Yeah.
Lover's Lane Drive. And then there's the rustling and then the scraping along the car. They drive off and the hook is hanging. Thank you, gave me the perfect hook. Is hanging on the side of the car, as they get home to safety, or they pick up a hitchhiker and. That person disappears. Resurrection Mary is one that I love in Chicago. A woman gets picked up, they drive to a place, she disappears as they get there, and it finds that she allegedly died at an accident at that place. There's this tale of that from France that we used in the international episode, but all of them tell you not to do something. One is in the Oregon, I believe, where not to get down to the beach at night. Someone will get you, but basically because, you could drown, it's a tide coming in. All of them are saying, don't pick up hitchhikers, don't go out and be promiscuous. All of these things, they'll have stories on the backside that are really learning moments or teaching moments, but they're bundled into something that is enough to scare you, but also keep your interest to hold on to that memory of it. And, that way your lesson is learned. And I think that's a fascinating place here. And when I bundle this all under, I guess, folklore, right? And
yeah, absolutely.
It's the story, though, that has the roots or the legs to keep walking on and on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it be contemporary or traditional, we're still telling them over and over again. All these years later.
Mm-hmm. These stories will also be repackaged depending on if that cultural moment reemerges.
Okay.
So, for example, if we're thinking of, have you heard the Kentucky Fried Rat story?
Yes.
No?
Yes.
It often is told as a working mother is on her way home and has to feed her children. So she stops by a KFC and she picks up a bucket of chicken. That chicken has a rat in it. One of her kids bites into it. And so that sort of has been argued to reveal anxieties about women entering the workforce and changes in social dynamics that happen around that. And we see that in a lot of the contemporary legends, as well as some of the more sort of contrived folk tales that have come out recently, these sorts of anxieties that are coming back. In my own work, I see that often with the Satanic Panic coming up. In the 1980s, people were very concerned about children playing D&D and listening to heavy metal.
Dungeons and Dragons, a gateway drug to hell.
Exactly. And we're seeing that sort of story being taken more seriously again in the cultural moment that we find ourselves in. So, yeah, I think that you're talking about that sort of impulse toward these stories being didactic is something that happens, and it's very much cyclical.
Well, that is, I blame that all on social media or public media at this point too, because of Stranger Things. D&D with the Hellfire Club in last season, and it brought all that back right as soon as it rehashes. So, but this secret club, they're doing that thing, and nobody really understands what it. Unless you play, you don't really even understand it, right? So and I can speak as a player back in the day, a long time ago. I'm pretty sure I came out okay. Although I'm here, so maybe not. I don't know, right?
Sorry,
But
Bert.
yeah, there it is. There's a lot of us that were pretty
Yeah.
screwed.
Yeah, but it's definitely
Okay,
coming back.
Bert.
Having teenagers in high school, it's definitely there again. So D&D is back, and or maybe it never went away.
Never left.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. It
But
never
But
left.
it's continuing on with
that's
new
been flowing.
generations.
Yep.
My nephew is really into it, and he is like 10 or 11.
That's not the only thing that's wrong with Bert. Heather's saying that's what's wrong with Bert. That's a lot of exclamation points. D&D. I was the heavy metal.
I too was the heavy metal.
Yeah.
That's why they work well together, right there. They got it all covered.
I mean, those things aren't mutually exclusive either. There's a lot of D&D heavy metal overlap.
It's true.
Wow.
Yeah.
Lot to think about after tonight.
There is a lot. So I guess I want to ask, and just to kind of wrap us up and be respectful of your time, but we could go a lot longer. We have no limit on this. So, but to be respectful of your time, where do you see your work taking you next, or how do you see it progressing forward to a conclusion, if there is a conclusion?
Well, that's a great question. Well, Sean and I can't speak for Sean, so Sean, feel free to add your own to this. But I am particularly interested in how people who have supernatural experiences and beliefs that may be informed by those experiences continue to maintain those experiences in this context of the Western contemporary scientific rationalist world that is so dismissive of those beliefs. Like, how do you were speaking before? I think Jamie, you noted this about how people need to sort of find a support network. So you might be reluctant to tell about your experiences to someone until they give you some indication that they're a safe person, and then maybe they give you the language to help you understand your own experience because maybe they had a similar experience. Maybe they have a belief system that can explain what you experienced. Those kinds of processes are the things that I am really, really interested in looking at. I'm especially interested in how so many people, this is not an original observation at all. Many scholars have written about this, but a lot of people in the contemporary Western world engage in a kind of creative construction of a belief system that's potentially a little different from what happened maybe before the age of mass media, simply because so much information is available now so easily and so rapidly. In a disparaging tone, some people have referred to this as the cherry-picking approach to belief. In other words, people look at all different kinds of belief traditions from around the world and they kind of pick and choose elements and they put them together. But there's no reason to be disparaging or negative about that. That's a perfectly logical thing to do if someone has reasons for doing that. If those beliefs or those words or those images help them understand what they see when they look at the world, then it's perfectly reasonable to do that. So I'm really interested in that kind of belief formation and the repeated sort of testing and maintenance of belief. And I'm especially interested in the use of science and technology in combination with paranormal investigation and other kinds of supernatural belief processes. Because again, officially, the sort of public discourse is that science and supernatural belief are oil and water, right? They don't go together. But of course, you guys are proof that is not the case at all, at least not from your perspective.
Right.
So that's the kind of thing that I'm really interested in pursuing. Sean, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in all that, as we've talked about many times privately, but I'm also interested in how these belief systems become a sort of cohesive whole and impact the way people go out and interact with others in the real world, and how their belief systems really do shape the way that they act on a daily basis, the things that they do, their social settings, all that. And I'm not sure where it's going to go or where it's going to end, but this research here certainly is informing some of those understandings now. We'll see where it ends. With ethnography, Jeff and I have talked about this several times and joked that ethnography never really has an endpoint. So the answer is, I guess, when we think we have enough, we'll stop and we'll see what happens.
Which might not ever happen.
Right. If people are interested in getting in touch with you, or I'm assuming that you'd like to talk to more people about this.
Oh, absolutely.
What's a way that they could do that? Is there a place that they can reach out to you?
Yeah, the easiest way would be email. Our Penn State official email addresses are usually the best way. Mine is jat639@psu.edu. Feel free to drop me a line if you'd like to talk more. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, mine is sed287@psu.edu. And because I don't sleep very often, I tend to answer emails very late at night. So feel free to email me anytime.
Yeah, we're a self-selecting bunch as academics.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw this comment up from Heather that she put a little while ago, because it sort of ties to some of the stuff we talked about. Having friends like Chad and Jamie help me feel secure in myself. Jott-Nyx is an amazing team of people. I love how education is a priority when they do public investigations.
Yeah, that's an awesome point, Heather.
I think that ties back to what you're saying, is you find your group of people that have the same beliefs as you, and you bolster each other up from that. So
yeah.
Well, it's a culture. It's a cultural thing in that we are not there to talk over or challenge down each of us, but we all expand because of the connections we make, and that holds true to the field in general. I believe anyway.
Mm-hmm.
We're all here for we should all be here for each other, and regardless if we're in academics or we're in the field of actual investigations, whatever it may be, if we don't support each other, we're failing, and we don't expand upon things, we don't communicate, engage, and learn, we're failing it. And we are lifelong learners, and I'm not saying that because you guys are here. I believe that. I truly believe that.
We've talked about that before, yeah,
a lot, yeah, and that's why we do this. I mean, that to Chad and I and our original co-host David Dermidi, our teammate, that's one thing we really were interested in the most in launching this project for us, was the learning curve that we would engage in. And I've said this on air many times. I had no idea that I would be able to expand as much as I have, and there are no walls, pun intended, to the paranormal, right? There's just so much stuff, and the world is a large place, and we will never, to your point of ending the project, we'll never end this either. We don't have to, and we'll end someday. We all will, right? We expire, but with it, there's not like there's just going to be so many episodes and we're done. There's so much stuff, and so many engaging people to talk to and connect with, and that's the fascinating thing for us as well. Just how do you go through all of it, and we just do it a week at a time, and next thing you know, our calendar's full, and here we are in season 3 with a lot in front of us still. So it's really very cool. Yeah, and thanks, Heather, for the comment. We do appreciate it. We love you too. And working with folks like you and Bert and many others as well, it helps keep us going forward.
Yeah. It's like finding the end of the internet. You're never going to find the end of it.
I've tried.
And here we go, Jamie.
Right. Oh my! And that's
Bert, I want to go on a road trip too. We should do that.
We can coordinate this. Don't you worry.
Yeah, let's do it.
We've done several already, and now what do we have? We don't have anything coming up yet this year. The end of the year, obviously, our events at the brewery, but we just went up to Vermont a couple months ago, 6 weeks or so, 2 months ago, to a place called Wilson Castle in Rutledge, Vermont. And there's an episode on it. We had some fantastic experiences there. So we do go out on the road. We do travel. We joke about it every episode because we're always talking about somewhere else to go in the world, or locally, or globally, wherever it may be. And some are not realistic road trips, of course, when you have to go to Europe or Asia.
Sure.
But or the Arabian Peninsula. But there'd be places we would if we could.
This just made me think of something just really briefly, Jamie, in response to your question before about the situation that I encountered, like in Japan. I think it is telling that in Japan, pretty popularly known ideas are these things they have something called power spotto, which means that's a Japanized pronunciation of the English words power spot. That's a place full of spiritual energy. And they also have shinde spotto, which means shinde means ghost. So ghost spots. So these are places that are well-known sites for legend trippers to visit in order to experience these kinds of places. So those are some other places that you should add to your bucket list road trip sites.
So.
I have one question about these spots. Do they have gift shops?
I
How else do you were there?
It'll often be like, this is made up, but like, this is a tunnel that if you walk through it, you will die before you reach the other side. Like that kind of thing. So probably not. Although who knows? Maybe on the metaphorical other side of that tunnel, maybe there
exactly.
So.
That is one of the most bizarre things, though, when you go to places and investigate. You're paying a ticket to go, and you're paying a ticket fee to go, but there's a gift shop inside or merchandise area of some kind, and it's like, we can't get away from that as I think as Westerners, or at least Americans. We can't seem to get away from the need for a trinket to prove
we've been there.
And I'm going to be guilty to say I do it all the time. So
I was going to say, I think both of us have T-shirts from every place that we've been.
I got a drawer filling up fast, So
Heather, I did my dissertation research in Ireland on fairy tradition. So you got to go if you haven't been.
Oh, Heather's been.
They're regulars, yeah.
Oh, you are. Oh, yeah. Awesome.
And then there's also the maple syrup. So Jamie, I'm thinking maybe what we should do is coordinate a trip to maybe White Hill.
Perfect.
You guys along. It's close. It's like 2 hours away, hour and a half, 2 hours.
Okay, that sounds awesome.
Fieldsboro, New Jersey. It's literally straight over the line across the river, the Delaware River, and it's about 5 more minutes. So it's straight across the turnpike and there. But it's a colonial era home that they're attempting to preserve it. It is aging and closed to the public other than educational opportunities. Not a public site per se, but open to the paranormal and friends to the paranormal. So,
excellent.
Really very cool place. We've been there several times, and we haven't made it back this year yet. So it is time.
And I think talking to Kyle would be a good experience for these two guys
absolutely.
as well. So
there's a fellow.
I'm free this weekend.
I can be.
We can arrange this, I'm sure.
We'll have to get it set up and figure it out. But I think that'd be a good trip for all of us. So
absolutely, more to come.
Yeah. So, well, on that note, though, I think we should wrap it up because we talked about being, cognizant of their time, and it's already.
And that was 20 minutes ago. Yeah, sorry.
No worries. It's a pleasure.
So I want to thank the two of you for coming on and spending an hour and a half with us. And hopefully this isn't the last time. I think as you guys develop more and figure out more, we can continue this conversation. So
I would love to.
You're always welcome to the brewery, of course.
Much obliged. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thanks to Albert and Heather too, and everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys.
So, on that note, we're gonna roll over, and Jamie and I are gonna talk about what's coming up. Hang out in the background. We will talk to you in a few minutes.
All right. See y'all later.
Yep. All right. Guess this is my turn, huh, Jamie?
Yeah. Please.
Upcoming episodes. We've got Paris Catacombs next week. Secrets Beneath the City of Lights. I'm interested in hearing about. I know a little bit about it, but I'm interested in hearing what Jamie's got to say. The following week, Jamie's going to be traveling. He might jump in with us. Never know. But Todd and Carmela are definitely going to be here with us from 222 Paranormal Investigation and Research. I'm looking forward to that conversation. They're great investigators. I think I've only investigated with them once at the brewery. I know you've done a couple with them, but
I think that the last year around Halloween, so it's been a minute.
Mm-hmm. So
with their experience there, otherwise, Wilson, a few other places, so I don't think so. You're right.
So, but anyway,
but they're always a joy.
We've run into each other at Paracons and White Hill Paracon, like all sorts of things. So they're a lot of fun. Can't wait to talk to them. The week after that, I'm going to talk about the Ghost of China's Forbidden City, wrapping up Ghost Month in China, like we talked about earlier. September 30th, Mysteries of Mount Shasta. Jamie's going to cover that. And then working on something for the following week, Jamie. I'm not going to talk about it too much yet. I mentioned it to you earlier. might come together. So there's some interest on the other end as well. So we'll see what happens there.
This is one of those moments I should listen when you tell me things, huh?
Yeah,
I
maybe.
totally forgot what it is. Dang it! All right,
So
I'll be as surprised as everyone else.
So, upcoming investigations: September 27th, October 11th, October 18th. In the next 2 months, we've got 3 investigations, but they are selling out fast. Last week we had a bunch more for this month, and we're running out. Hopefully, we can get Sean and Jeffrey there as well. Again, one of these investigations. Talk to more people and get some more experiences there for them. November 8th and December 6th are then the final 2 for the year. So that's it's coming up fast. I can't believe we're talking about December already, but here we are. And then our social media. We have a website, Jott-Nyx or Jott-Nyx Check that out. Email us at paranormallenspodcast@gmail.com. You know where to find us on Facebook. You've already found us there, obviously, or YouTube. But check out all our links, including our merchandise store and things like that, at Linktree/Paranormal Lens. That's linktr.ee/Paranormal Lens. I think that covers it, huh, Jamie?
Yeah, it's pretty simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we say this all the time too, but if there's an episode you'd like us to cover for you, some topic of your interest and choice, just reach out, whether it be via our email address or whether it be through the the comments of an episode as you find us. We see it all, and certainly we're always willing to dig into something that interests you as an individual. We've done lots and lots of listener submissions already. We're always willing to do more. It helps expand, like you said earlier, helps us expand our knowledge and our understanding, and we like a challenge. Just give us a little time to cover it and do the research. But since we self-produce, we can move our schedule around, and we'll definitely get you there. So appreciate that. Please reach out.
Yeah, definitely. So, any other closing thoughts, Jamie?
This was a great conversation. And I'm so again. Sometimes the buildup does and the hype doesn't equal the outcome, but I'm wowed, and I really appreciate Jeffrey and Sean for joining us, and hopefully we can do this again sometime in the future with an extended conversation. Obviously, hope we'll see them in the field as well. So it's but such a kind gesture and a lot of their time tonight, and we really appreciate that as well. We know what it's like having work in the morning.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Jamie, that was a perfect segue to my closing thoughts for tonight. So
take it away.
The conversation may end here tonight, but the questions remain. Keep seeking, keep questioning, and always stay alert, stay respectful, and stay curious. Good night.